Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Theravada Buddhism Series, Dhamma Talk 71. Dependence Condition. Nissaya Paccayo. Dependence Condition in Pali, Nissaya Paccayo, is the seventh of the 24 conditions in Patthana Pali. These conditions explain the intricate relationships of cause and effect between mind and matter. There are 11 points in this seventh condition, Nissaya Paccayo. The first 5 points are the cognizance dependence condition, and the remaining 6 points are the pre-nascence dependence condition. 5 are co-nascence, 6 are pre-nascence dependence condition. The first group of 5 is similar to the co-nascence condition, except that it does not include the 6th factor of co-nascence condition, Sahajata Paccayo. So, we will not explain the first group of 5 again, as we have dealt with the cognizance condition. Even though we say these are similar, we need to remember cognizance emphasize cause and effect arising together. That's a focus, that's a topic. And the 5 points in this Nissaya Paccayo, the current topic, focus on dependency. So different highlights, different focus, entirely different conditions. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and heart basis or sensitivities, if you like, are materialities, rupa. And corresponding consciousness that arises from those bases are nama. These two play a critical role in this Nissaya, Paccayo, or dependence condition. Whenever a mental object strikes the mind door, by pre-nascence dependence condition, the heart base give rise to consciousness that knows, that thinks, that intends, and that plans. Now here is a word, we call it heart base, couple of times. In Pali, it's called Hadaya Vattu, English heart base. What it is it is in the heart, a material in the heart. In the heart, there's a very small compartment with blood. That particular blood in that small compartment contains a certain material quality, which means materiality with a certain quality. That is the heart base. That specific thing is the heart base. It is the base or the seeds which requires for consciousness to arise. Consciousness cannot arise on its own. It needs a base. Seeing consciousness needs a eye base or high sensitivity. Hearing consciousness needs ear base or ear sensitivity. So also is, let's call it thinking consciousness, to differentiate from the seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Thinking consciousness need a heart base to arise. So, you have heard a few words called base, heart base, heart sensitivity, ear base, ear sensitivity, base, sensitivity. They are one and the same. And here it's called Hadaya Vattu. Vattu can mean materiality, or some translators as object, or you can call it something or a thing. That is Vattu. So when it is a thing, it indicates a substance, and it needs a material substance, the base, for the consciousness to arise. So, under this context, Vattu, thing, let's call it materiality, but it's very specific. is the most appropriate translation. To explain with an analogy, let's take forests and the mountains. They exist, but their existence depends on the earth. Without the earth, a forest cannot arise. Without the earth, the mountains cannot occur. And the earth exists before the mountains and the forest. So this is an analogy. Similarly, the sixth sense consciousness eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and thinking consciousness, sixth sense consciousness, arises depending on the base, six bases, and the six bases exist before the six consciousness. In Patana Pali, it's always used the word vittu. Vittu. A thing instead of an object or instead of sensitivity. Now, I will recite a phrase from the book related to the I under this Nissaya Paccayo. It runs like this in English translation. I base is related to the I consciousness elements and its associated states by dependence condition. That's it, that's how the line runs. But our elders explained in detail so that we could understand. There's eye base or eye sensitivity or a thing, vittu. It's the cause, it's the condition, cause or condition for eye consciousness element. They just don't say eye consciousness. Eye consciousness element. Don't want to get your mind drifted into spirit or a soul or consciousness. Eye consciousness element. And 7 universal mental factors do arise by the pre-nascence dependence condition. So, not only the consciousness, there's another group of mental factors. It's called 7 universal mental factors. Arise together with the consciousness, depending on the I base. Or Sakha Vittu. Sakha is I, Vittu is a thing. So, if you remember correctly, 7 universal mental factors. What are they? These 7 always arises with a consciousness, any type of consciousness. Just to remind ourselves, what are these 7? Contact, feeling. Contact is phassa. Feeling is vedana. Perception is sanya. Volition, cetana. One-pointedness, ekaggata. Life force, jiva, indriya. And attention, manasikara. 7 universal mental factors: contact, feeling, perception, volition, one-pointedness, life force, and attention. They arise with the consciousness by pre-nascence condition, pre-nascence dependence condition. The consciousness that occurs depending on the I is called I consciousness or seeing consciousness. It sounds trivial, but we need to know I consciousness and seeing consciousness are one and the same. Why? Because they arise depending on the I base. Without I, seeing consciousness cannot occur. Only when a visible form strikes the eye, seeing consciousness that knows the form occurs. Similarly, one can understand the remaining 4 material bases: ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base. Pre-nascence dependence condition is the cause and effect relationship of pre-existing vittu or thing and the corresponding consciousness that follows. We are trying to explain that and using different little approaches. Now we are talking about the 5 physical bases. There's another one we know, heart base, hadiya vittu. Eventually everything goes to the heart base. Heart base is the cause of 3 mind elements, in Pali called manodhatu, and 72 types of consciousness and 52 mental factors, cetasika. By pre-nascence dependent condition. These arises, there are many ways to arise, but this particular one is based on pre-nascence dependence condition. different conditions. This is particularly something that depends on another thing, and it exists to follow what it depends on. No corresponding consciousness can arise without the external physical or mental object striking the internal base. Vipassana yogis observe the coming together of the receiving at the basis, striking external or internal form, and the igniting the consciousness that's coming. Yogis observe the coming together of the receiving, striking, and igniting elements. Under Nissaya Paccayo, 5 sense consciousness expand into 10. How can the 5 sense consciousness become 10? And in Pali it is called Dve Pincha Vinyan. Dve means 2. Pincha is 5. Vinyan is consciousness. 2 sets of 5 sense consciousness. Because these consciousness can be wholesome or unwholesome. Kusala or akusala. So that's why 5 sense, a set of wholesome is 5, a set of unwholesome is 5. So if you want to know detail, it becomes 10. Not just simply 5 sense consciousness, 2 sets of 5 sense consciousness. And these happen as a result of past life sankhara. What is sankhara? Plainly speaking, good physical, verbal, and mental actions, and bad or lousy physical, verbal, and mental actions. Those are called sankhara, mental formation. And all these actions of the past life produce this 2 sets of 5 sense consciousness. Which is seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and intending consciousness of wholesome and unwholesome nature arises in this life. Always cause and effect. That's why one encounters repulsive objects, disagreeable objects, beautiful objects, agreeable objects in this life, one after the other. These are the results, and your actions, past life actions, are the cause. I consciousness arises depending on the I base, form, light, and attention. Before we just say I base, I consciousness arises depending on the I base. because that is the key factor. But that is not only sufficient. It also needs a form to be seen. It also light to make it available to see. There might be a form, there might be an eye in a totally pitch black dark room. Seeing consciousness cannot arise. And also attention. Okay. You might be staring at let's call it a dog. The form is there, the eye is there, the light is there. But at that time, you are thinking quite strongly about an event which took place yesterday that makes you very angry. Your attention is on that thought. Because of that, you don't really see the dog. As you don't see the dog, there is no seeing consciousness. Because attention is lacking. Attention is on a content of a thought. That's why it needs 4 factors: eye base, form, light, and attention. And similarly, eye consciousness depends on, of course, ear base. And then a sound. Not only the sound, an open space. Let's say there's a sound on the other side of a thick wall, soundproof thick wall. The space is blocked with the soundproof thick wall. One cannot hear the sound. And if you cannot hear the sound, there's no hearing consciousness. And finally, of course, attention. So, ear consciousness depends on ear base, sound, open space, and attention. In the same way, nose consciousness or smelling consciousness, depending on the nose base, smell, airwave to carry an attention. Tongue consciousness or tasting consciousness requires tongue-based taste buds, flavor or taste, and saliva, something to wet. In the mouth there's a saliva and attention. You know, when people are very old, they lost interest in eating because they cannot really taste the food. And the reason they cannot taste the food is the body, the mouth, the tongue do not produce saliva or produce very little saliva. As there is no taste, one doesn't want to eat. Hence, no tasting consciousness. Touching consciousness requires body base or body sensitivity. And then the earth element is a substance. Or you can call it hardness. must have a certain degree of hotness. Earth-based, body-based, earth element, and tangibility or touch and attention. 4 factors. All those 5 physical bases each has 4 factors for a relative or corresponding consciousness to arise. And one more, of course, thinking consciousness. Let's call it thinking consciousness. Thinking consciousness. What does thinking consciousness? Thinking consciousness knows. Thinking consciousness intend, plan. Those are the qualities or manifestation, knowing, intending, planning. I just use the word thinking consciousness just to distinguish from the other 5 physical. And what does it depend on? It depends on life continuum. You remember Bhavanga, passive consciousness? That's life continuum, Bhavanga. It depends on the Bhavanga, and also it depends on the mind object or mental object. And of course the heart base, Hadayavatu, and attention, Manasikara, to arise. Those are the requirements of these 6 sense consciousness to arise. The heart base exists before the mental elements, and the mental elements depend on the heart base to arise. Therefore, this process is called prenescence, dependence, condition. So we keep talking about this heart base, intertwined with the consciousness. But if one takes this heart base, Hadayavatu, as mind, it is mind. If you take it that way, you are clinging with craving, tanha. You are clinging with tanha. And if one takes the heart base, it's my power base, and you are clinging with conceit, mana. And if one believes the heart base is a soul or a self, is clinging with a wrong view. So, due to clinging to a heart base, what arises? Greed-rooted consciousness arises. Unwholesome, greed-rooted consciousness arises. However, if one uses vipassana, a vipassana yogi, then one sees the heart base as impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. And if you see that way, vipassana kusala are arising or occurring. That is how wholesome and unwholesome resultant consciousness arises. Depending on the heart base, through the renaissance dependence condition. This will give you a brief peek into what Nissaya dependence condition is. May all of you be able to constantly observe the coming of the three receiving element, striking element, and igniting element. Observe it, and may you be able to understand anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering, and non-self with clarity and attain nibbana as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much.